The story kicks off with our main character, Makoto Yaemori, facing a massive horde of monsters. All by himself, he managed to save the world from a major crisis, pushing back the Demon King's entire army during the Dark Age. After the long battle, he breathes a sigh of relief, glad that everything went according to plan. But just then, one of his companions says it's time to move on to the next phase, and suddenly blood goes flying everywhere. It turns out Makoto's friends wait until he was completely wiped out to betray him. These people were even worse than the demons he had just defeated, and after getting backstabbed like that, he's in total disbelief. He questions why they betrayed him and then swears he'll remember their faces, because somehow he's gonna drag every last one of them down to the depths with him. However, he suddenly wakes up, startled by someone calling his name. A woman then approaches, asking if he's okay, but our protagonist is completely clueless, since he's pretty sure he was supposed to be a goner. Looking around, he sees a bunch of strangers and wonders where in the world he is. Totally lost, he asks himself if this place is actually the underworld. A guy then starts making fun of him, saying Makoto is weak for passing out in the middle of a test. Another student quickly corrects him, saying they shouldn't call him young master anymore since he's already been kicked out of the family. A girl then ignores the argument and turns to her boyfriend, telling him to focus on the test and break a new record. Her boyfriend arrogantly replies that he'll definitely do just that. As the teacher tells everyone to get back to the test, a flood of memories hits our protagonist. That's when he understands he's no longer in his old world and has been reincarnated into someone with the same name. The previous owner of this body was born into a prestigious family, but because of his blocked meridians, he was branded as useless and kicked out of the clan after his parents passed away. With that in mind, he finally accepts that he's been reborn in another world, and according to the memories he received, the humans in this world don't know how to cultivate. A special energy called Chui exists in this universe, but people don't know how to absorb it like they did in his old world. Although the ki he senses is very faint, he can still feel it in the air, and even with so little energy around, he naturally knows the most efficient way to absorb Qi. If he stores this power in his body and keeps practicing, he can also strengthen his body, and that's exactly what a cultivator does. After absorbing the energy, he managed to reach the first stage of cultivation and cleared the blockage in his meridians. He even grew a little taller because of it. As soon as our protagonist gets his original strength back, he's heading straight back to his continent. He's got some serious payback to deliver to those who betrayed him. However, he knows his current strength is still weak and that he needs to take it slow. From there, he decides he'll use the test to check the changes in his body and see what he's capable of. He then walks over to the instructors, and one of them asks if he's feeling alright. Makoto says he is and announces he's also participating in the 100-meter dash. A student scoffs at him, saying it's Kitama's turn, the school's record holder, who's already got a guaranteed spot in college. Kitama himself, along with his girlfriend, calls him trash for having thrown away his pride. Our MC doesn't pay any attention to the taunts, as he knows he's only at the first stage of cultivation, but he's also aware that a cultivator's body is miles beyond that of a normal person. Still, the other guy keeps running his mouth, saying he's going up against the best, and that everyone else dodged this matchup. The scene cuts to the 100-meter dash, and the instructor tells them to get ready. So, the two of them get into a starting position. Kitama is practically buzzing with excitement to humiliate our protagonist. The instructor then gives the signal to start. Kitama bolts ahead while our protagonist stays put at the starting line. But Makoto just cracks a little smirk and starts a 3-second countdown. The students watching mock him for not even being able to move. After finishing his countdown, he says that even with a 3-second head start, he'll win easily. With that, the protagonist takes off at an insane speed. Seeing that, the students who were mocking him are in total shock, because when cultivators first appeared on the Luyu continent, their abilities turned the world's common sense completely on its head. They possessed physical bodies, speed, and perception that went way beyond human limits. Our protagonist then stops just before the finish line, thinking that for him, regular people are no challenge at all. Behind him, Kitama was giving it his all to win, but Makoto just starts a countdown. Everyone watching is floored, realizing he's just toying with Kitama. Makoto thinks that the power difference between a cultivator and a normal human is the same as between a modern human and a caveman. The distance between the two racers is like heaven and earth, and after counting down from 3, he finally crosses the finish line. The teacher is stunned when she sees Makoto's time, 9.38 seconds, a new record. Meanwhile, the former record holder is on his knees, utterly humiliated. He can't believe what just happened, saying it's impossible. Our protagonist is optimistic about his new body, thinking that compared to his old self, there's a huge difference, but the physical aptitude itself is perfect. Determined, he says that this is just the beginning, and that he'll show everyone he can reach the top once again. In the past, he was known as the cultivator Makoto Yaemori, the strongest on the Loyu continent. At 65 years old, he reached the 11th stage of cultivation, becoming the most powerful cultivator on the continent. But after pushing back the Demon King's army that invaded the continent, what he got in return was betrayal from his own comrades. The scene then cuts to the school bathroom. Our protagonist looks at himself in the mirror, thinking that to reach the first stage of cultivation as fast as possible, he has no choice but to borrow the power of special medicines. However, he's worried because all these remedies are extremely expensive. Checking the prices on his phone, he realizes that the money the previous owner of this body has is nowhere near enough. He then gets the idea that he could make money by creating and selling talismans, but after seeing his balance of just 1,000 yen, he realizes he can't even afford materials for low-quality talismans. Suddenly, Kitama shows up behind him. He corners Makoto in the bathroom. Haru Osaki, the captain of the boxing club, informs him that because of the little stunt he pulled today, they're collecting this month's protection fee early. Our protagonist immediately remembers that this same old story about collecting protection money happened just last week. Haru Osaki then tells one of his goons to take care of our boy, saying a piece of trash like him will be no problem at all. The boxing club captain then lunges forward with a powerful punch, and our protagonist thinks that the old owner of this body would have just taken the beating. But to the bully's surprise, our protagonist nails him with a hook. From a cultivator's perspective, even the captain of a boxing club is just a weak, ordinary person. Without giving the others time to react, Makoto goes for the next goon. With a single strike, he hits the other student in the face, who can't even put up a defense. Seeing that, the two remaining bullies are completely dumbfounded, wondering if that guy is really Yaemori. Our boy turns to them with a cold stare and asks if they're scared. He then rushes forward and grabs both students' wrists with absurd strength. Because of that, the two are completely immobilized by our protagonist's power. They start screaming in pain, telling him to let them go immediately. Makoto just gives them an intimidating smile and says not to be so cold, as the fun has just begun. Completely desperate, the two start begging for forgiveness, pleading with him to stop. Right after, our hero throws both of them aside, ending the scuffle. Kitama then starts begging for mercy. Seeing this, Harosaki gets furious and clenches his fists, ready for a fight. With a yell, he charges at our protagonist, saying he won't let him get away, but Makoto hits him with a cross right to the face before he can do anything. The impact is so strong that the boxing club captain goes flying and crashes into one of the stall doors. Haru is left on the floor, completely beaten down and unable to get up. Our boy then turns to the others and warns them that next time, he won't go so easy. Kitama looks at him, terrified, thinking the guy is a monster. The remaining bullies admit they were wrong and ask our protagonist to stay away. Taking advantage of their fear, he says in that case, they should return what's his. The bullies are totally confused and ask what he's talking about. With a threatening glare, he reminds them they stole things from him, and the terrified bully promises to give everything back. Leaving the bathroom, he thinks that maybe he overdid it a little, but those guys won't have the guts to tell anyone. He also reflects that the school is too crowded and an inconvenient place, so he plans to leave as soon as he gets the chance. Finally, he counts the money he got back and is happy to finally have some cash for his plans. With this money in hand, our protagonist is excited because now he can buy low-quality materials to make some talismans and take the first step toward his revenge. From there, he gathers various special items like mystical stones and herbs. Using his spiritual energy, he begins to refine these materials to create mystical effects, something even a cultivator at the first stage can do easily. With everything ready, he prepares to start production. A moment later, our boy creates several talismans of different colors and types. Holding the magical items, he thinks that if he can sell them, he'll make some good money. However, 3 weeks go by and our protagonist fails to sell a single talisman. Sitting on the street, he realizes that people are looking at his products with a great deal of suspicion. Faced with this situation, our protagonist is completely bummed out by his failure. Suddenly, he hears a bark coming from somewhere and gets confused. A moment later, a little dog comes running towards him. The little guy seems to be badly injured and collapses right in front of him, making our hero wonder if he was hit by a car. Without a second thought, Makoto gets closer to help the dog. This gives him the idea to test the effects of one of his talismans, offering the item to the dog. The healing talisman starts to glow with a green light and, according to its effects, can restore organs and heal injured bodies. In that same instant, the little dog opens its eyes, completely recovered, and to our protagonist's surprise, the animal is totally healed and full of life, barking happily. Our boy just kneels there, observing the impressive result of his talisman. Suddenly, the little dog starts growling at an approaching matching couple, and our protagonist doesn't understand its reaction. The woman, named Shizuru Shuga, complains to her companion, saying it didn't matter if the dog was a goner, since he was the only one who wanted to come. She continues the argument, yelling at the guy to take the animal to the hospital and stating she never asked him to come along. At that moment, the Harris of the Suga family finally finds the dog she was looking for. She walks toward our protagonist while her friend, named Showada, yells, asking where he came from. Getting closer, she's confused because the dog, which was covered in blood before, now looks perfectly fine. Our boy notices she's carrying a paper from the hospital and asks if she's on her way to visit someone. That's when he realizes a huge opportunity to sell his talismans has just appeared. He then stands up and shows the woman the green talisman he used to heal the little dog. Her companion Showada gets angry right away and calls him a scammer, telling him not to try to fool them. The guy continues with the accusations, saying it was probably our protagonist who hit the dog just to set up this scene. But Shizuru completely ignores her friend and asks if that talisman can be used on anyone. With a hopeful expression, the young woman asks if the talisman can even heal someone in a vegetative state. Our protagonist realizes she wants to save a sick person and confirms that the talisman's spiritual energy can even heal brain damage. So, he offers a spiritual cleansing talisman and explains that the item is quite effective for people in that condition. Her friend, Shawada, however, gets annoyed and tells Shizuru to be more sensible instead of resorting to this kind of thing. Completely ignoring the guy, our boy explains that the method of use is simple. Just hold the item near the person she wants to heal. He then takes the opportunity to state the price, saying the larger ones cost 400,000 yen and the smaller ones 200,000. To everyone's surprise, Shizuru offers 1 million yen and asks him to hand over all the talismans he has. Sheicho Wada tries to stop the deal and tells our protagonist to get lost, but our protagonist grabs his arm with absurd strength before he can do anything. With a cold look, he warns the guy not to interfere in his business, and the hair of the Wada family realizes his arm is completely immobilized. He tells the guy to beat it if he's going to keep getting in the way. Without much patience, he simply tosses Sho to the ground like it's nothing. With the deal successfully closed, he hands the talismans to the woman and takes the money. He also explains that besides the healing talisman, the yellow one is for protection, and the red one is a fireball talisman. He says he hopes she never has to use the last two items. With a look full of hope, Shizuru thanks him for his help, but before leaving, she turns and asks for our protagonist's name. However, Makoto leaves without a word and Sheicho Wada keeps insisting that our boy is a con artist. The woman, however, thinks that even if it seems impossible, she has to try anything if there's even the slightest chance of her mother regaining consciousness. Our hero starts walking down the street and soon notices the little dog is following him. With the money he got, he can finally look for a place to live. The next step in his plan is to search for medicinal herbs that can be used in his cultivation. Suddenly, the little dog barks towards a specific location, catching the protagonist's attention. He then realizes that the mansion is emitting a strong spiritual energy. He's surprised as he didn't expect to find something like this so easily. Looking closer, he sees that the plant growing in the garden is actually a silver heart grass, a very rare item. The scene cuts to the hospital, where Shawada is having his injured arm treated by a nurse. He complains to the healthcare professional, saying Makoto is not a good person. He swears that the next time they meet, our protagonist will have to deal with him. At that moment, an older man in a suit appears and says that Sho was kind to accompany her, but she treated him poorly. The man, named Kenji Suga, a city councilman from Konkai City, appears and asks what she was thinking, making them look like fools. He continues his lecture, questioning if his daughter fell for a scammer's trick and if she wants to become a laughingstock. At the same time, two nurses are gossiping nearby, saying they heard she bought a talisman for tens of thousands of yen and commenting on how even a councilman's daughter can be easily fooled. Shizuru, however, seems determined and, with a sad look, says she wants to try one more time. Holding the talisman tightly, she thinks this is the last thing she can do and that she has to try everything. Kenji Suga loses his patience and shouts that's enough, saying she's lost her mind. Her father continues the scolding, asking how she can believe such a suspicious story and if her next step is to pray to a god. But Shizuru confronts him, asking what he's done then. She questions how many times he visited her mother while she was unconscious, blaming him for not taking her to the hospital sooner. The accusation catches the councilman by surprise, and he's shocked by his daughter's words. She continues, saying that if she gives up and her mother passes, he'll just act like nothing happened and go out with other women. Completely furious, her father raises his hand to strike her, yelling about how dare she say that. However, at the last second he stops. He adjusts his suit, trying to compose himself. Finally, he turns and walks away, saying she's become utterly insolent. With the talisman in her hand, she yells that no, her father can't stop her from trying. She approaches her mother's bed and firmly states that she will never give up. A moment later, the magical item begins to shine with an intense blue light that illuminates the entire room. This glow catches Kenji's attention, and he turns around, completely startled, asking what's happening. To everyone's surprise, her mother, named Yoko Shuga, opens her eyes and comments that her daughter looks a little thinner. Overcome with emotion, Shizuru calls out for her mother while Kenji runs out of the room, shouting that he's going to get a doctor. Excited, he yells in the hallway, calling for help and announcing that his wife has finally woken up. A doctor and a nurse who are nearby are completely shocked by the news and ask if it's true. The doctor then rushes into the room and says they need to take her for some tests immediately. After the tests, the professional explains that although they can't be certain now, in about a year and a half, she should be able to return to her normal life. The heiress of the Suga family looks at the glowing talisman in her hand and realizes that this could only have happened because of it. At that moment, the magical item dissolves into particles of light, and she confirms that it was what really worked. Seeing that scene, the doctor and Kenji shout that it's impossible, unable to believe what they just witnessed. Her husband says it must be a miracle, and the doctor suggests contacting a famous professor who is in the running for a medicine prize. Shecho Wada is completely shocked and wonders if our protagonist is actually an immortal. Shizuru then hugs her mother tightly as she apologizes for causing her daughter so much pain. The heiress of the Suka family now believes that a higher power exists and swears that if she ever meets our protagonist again, she will repay him immensely. The scene cuts to our boy, who has finally finished moving in and, along with the little dog, celebrates the first step toward returning to his home continent. A moment later, the image of his treacherous former companions flashes in his mind, and he reinforces his promise that he will never forgive them. With that in mind, our protagonist sets his goal to reach the 11th stage of Chuai refinement, and to do so, he needs to find a spiritual source and rare materials. With a determined look, he tells himself that the day of his revenge is getting closer. Lying on his new bed, however, he realizes a huge problem: the spiritual energy in this world is disappearing, and if this continues, he won't be able to cultivate anymore. Faced with this situation, he understands that to get out of this mess, he needs to find a place or an item with a high concentration of energy. He thinks that only spiritual sources or very rare materials could help him in this mission. However, he remembers the incredible luck he had in finding the silver heart grass growing in that mansion's garden. The silver heart grass is a spiritual material different from common medicinal herbs, as it's used to refine elixirs that increase a cultivator's level. From there, he hatches a plan to refine a Juki pill using the plant's berries, which could take him to the second stage of cultivation. Excited by the possibility, he decides he needs to start training immediately, as you never know when something unexpected might happen. The scene then shifts to a bustling street where several people are gathered. There, our protagonist is sitting at his talisman stall again, realizing that the ingredients for the Juki pill are extremely expensive, and that even if he sold everything he has, he wouldn't get the necessary money. Our protagonist thinks that even when he tries to sell his talismans discreetly, he can't seem to stay out of trouble. With that, he glances to the side and notices that the same guys from before are back, watching him from a distance. Our boy notes that they've been watching him since the third day he opened his stall, and today, the group seems much more organized and larger. Faced with the situation, he decides he's going to have to confront these loafers to find out once and for all what they want. Just then, a girl approaches and calls him by name, totally surprised to find him there. The girl asks what he's doing there. Noticing he hasn't been to the university lately, she deduces on her own that because of his weak body and being kicked out of the Yamori family, he's now broke. Makoto immediately remembers her as the classmate who always defended the previous owner of this body. With a look of pity, the girl offers to lend him some money so he can go back to college. However, our protagonist refuses the help, saying he has something important to do and leaves, leaving the girl behind, completely confused. Watching him walk away, his classmate gets very worried, feeling that something is definitely wrong with him. The scene then cuts to a narrow, dirty alley between two city buildings. With eyes full of determination, our hero decides he's going to take down all those guys at once. He runs into the alley, and one of the men following him appears right behind, a knife in his hand. The group of thugs yells that he's running away, and they all start chasing him into the dead-end alley. In the dead-end alley, the group of thugs corners our protagonist, who has nowhere to run. Makudaiva remains completely calm. One of the henchmen yells with a victorious air that now he can't escape, but our boy just challenges them to come at him all at once. Faced with the challenge, the gang of thugs is ready to attack our protagonist. Their leader scoffs, saying this is going to be a lot of fun. Our protagonist then asks what their goal was in spying on him for so many days and who sent them. The group's boss calls him a complete fool for picking a fight with a major organization and still selling his goods as if nothing happened. A moment later, he reveals that the young miss of the Amitani family has taken an interest in him and wishes for him to find happiness in his next life. Makoto then recalls from his memories that the previous owner of this body was engaged to a girl named Amitani Setsu. He also remembers that the engagement was broken off because he was weak and ended up being kicked out of his family, finding it very strange that someone would try to take him out over a broken engagement. But determined, our protagonist thinks that, if they won't talk willingly, he'll just have to force them to tell the truth. Hiding nearby, his classmate realizes the Yakuza is trying to take out Makoto and is completely shocked to see he's gotten involved with such dangerous people. She's extremely worried, sure that with such a frail body, he doesn't stand a chance against so many men armed to the teeth. Realizing the imminent danger, the girl grabs her phone and quickly calls the police, asking for help as fast as she can. However, before the girl can finish the call, a voice behind her comments that a little kitten has snuck into the alley. A huge bald man grabs her from behind and, with a menacing look, asks who she's calling. Terrified, the girl screams for him to let her go, but the other goons just watch without doing anything. A moment later, the thugs notice the biggest presence and recognize him as the gang leader. The Yakuza leader then grabs her by the hair. Our protagonist recognizes his classmate as Machiyama and wonders why on earth she followed him to such a dangerous place. The bald guy then makes fun of our boy, saying he's quite popular for seducing this girl while already having Miss Setsu's interest. Even in danger, Machiyama desperately yells for Makoto to run away as fast as he can because those guys are armed. The girl tries to stay calm, thinking they wouldn't dare lay a finger on her since she's the daughter of the prestigious Machiyama family. The gang leader, however, laughs at her naivety and says that if he ends her life right there, no one will ever find out what happened. He then pulls out a knife and brings it to her neck as the girl begs him to stop this madness. The thug just replies that if she wants to blame someone, she should blame her own stupidity for meddling where she wasn't wanted. But just as the attacker was about to strike, our protagonist dashes forward at an insane speed to protect her. With a single, precise blow, he hits the bald man's hand, forcing him to drop the knife immediately. He then prepares for his next attack, thinking he didn't want to draw attention, but now he has no other choice. He then slams the bald guy against the wall, thinking that getting caught isn't his style. The gang leader had been defeated with just a single attack. Seeing this unbelievable scene, Mochiyama is speechless, wondering if that guy is really the Makoto she knew. The other henchmen are also terrified by our boy's absurd strength and back away in fear. With a cold, intimidating gaze, the protagonist warns that he's only going to ask once and wants to know who sent them. The scene then cuts to a police car where an officer receives a call on the radio about a group on the move. The officer, named Kaya, asks where they are and what's happening. His partner informs him that over 30 people are heading to the alleys of East Street and that there are reports of a hostage on site. Faced with the situation, Kaya floors it and requests immediate backup, giving the order not to tell Chief Onaga anything. At the same time, another officer warns over the radio not to approach recklessly, as they are dangerous dealers who won't hesitate to take a life. Kaya tries to call his partner again but gets no response, which makes him even more tense. Suddenly, the radio crackles back to life, and the voice on the other end calmly says that backup is no longer needed. The officer at the scene of the chaos begins to explain that the kid he mentioned earlier took care of the problem. The image then shows all the thugs lying on the ground, completely defeated, as the officer reports that the kid took them all down by himself. Our protagonist had defeated them all with ease, and was holding the bald guy's head. The gang leader, his face all bruised, refuses to believe he was defeated by a piece of trash from the Yamori family. Our protagonist then asks where he got his information, whether it was from the Amitani family or the Yamori family. He gives him 3 seconds to answer, otherwise things will get ugly. The thug tries to buy time, but our boy's patience is running out fast. At that moment, the police finally arrive, and one of the officers shouts for him to stop right there. Officer Kaya runs toward him and warns him not to go any further, not to stoop to the level of those criminals. Makoto turns and notices the police have arrived, wondering if it was just a coincidence. He knows it would be easy to force the thug to talk, but he also understands he can't reveal his true strength in front of the cops. Looking at all the defeated goons on the ground, he decides it's better not to draw any more attention for now. So, he lets go of the gang leader. The thug feels relieved to have escaped a worse fate, shocked, while our protagonist reflects that with his current strength, he can't go against the power of the state. Officer Kaya breathes a sigh of relief for arriving in time and is impressed that a single kid managed to handle all of that on his own. He looks at the crime scene and can't believe the kid faced so many dangerous criminals by himself. Approaching our hero, the officer introduces himself as Kaya Haruki from the Numi City Police. Makiyama, who was there the whole time, waves to the officer and says it's a pleasure to meet him too. Sergeant Kaya Haruki tries to calm the situation, and his partner, Rokohara Fumiya, introduces himself to the young woman. Our protagonist, however, realizes the government's surveillance is flawless and that they probably saw everything that happened. Kaya then explains that his colleague will take their statements later and promises he won't ask anything unrelated to the incident. Suddenly, Rokohara spots his superior and calls him over to the crime scene. A man with a sinister smile appears and comments that if he hadn't arrived, our boy would have let the criminals escape. This man is Police Commissioner Onaga Kaizu, and he announces that the student right there is under arrest for assault. He then shows an arrest warrant to our protagonist. Mochiyama is outraged by the injustice and yells that they were the ones who were attacked first. The commissioner just stares at her coldly and questions what she's talking about. He claims the only thing he saw was the kid relentlessly assaulting the others, while one of his men helps the defeated thug. Kaya loses his patience and grabs Onaga by the collar, telling him not to be ridiculous because he knows exactly who those people are. The corrupt chief, however, coldly replies that he's not talking nonsense. He then threatens his subordinate, asking since when he's been challenging him, and stating he can take away his position at the station anytime. Absolutely furious, the honest officer yells that his superior is a despicable man for doing this. Amid the chaos, Rokuhara holds his partner back and asks him to calm down so the situation doesn't get any worse. Makoto observes the situation and realizes that the mastermind behind it all went to the trouble of staging a big scene just to frame him. Onaga Kaizu sarcastically praises him for being quite reasonable for a criminal, but our protagonist understands this is a good chance to gather information so his training won't be disrupted. Right after, our boy confronts the corrupt commissioner and asks how he knew he was a student. Realizing he said too much, Onaga is left speechless, and our protagonist concludes he's just a lackey for someone more powerful. With that in mind, our hero already targets the true mastermind behind the corrupt cop and wonders if he should take care of him right now. The commissioner tries to hide his nervousness and says he has no idea what he's talking about, then orders his men to take him away. And so, our protagonist is escorted out of the alley. However, he shows a button he ripped from the commissioner's uniform and says it's a shame things ended this way. Onaga is completely shocked to see his button is missing and wonders when the kid managed to do that. As he's being handcuffed, our protagonist discreetly warns that the next time they meet, just taking a button won't be enough. The corrupt cop turns around furiously and swears he'll remember this humiliation for the rest of his life. The scene cuts to a prison hallway, showing that our hero has been taken to a pretty rough place. Inside one of the cells, a muscular, bald man is sitting on the floor, meditating peacefully. One of the guards approaches the cell, banging a baton on the bars to get the prisoner's attention. Outside, a police officer speaks to the inmate, informing him that he will be arriving soon as their request has been approved. He says their request is to eliminate our protagonist, and the prisoner simply confirms he understands. The scene cuts to Makoto being escorted by two guards into the prison. A moment later, cell door opens. They shove our protagonist inside the cell. The door slams shut, and our boy wonders if their plan is to get rid of him in here. But with a confident look, he finds the whole situation interesting, to say the least. At the back of the cell, he spots the same muscular prisoner from before, meditating, and questions if this guy is the mastermind behind it all. The inmate then says that for a long time, he avoided laying a hand on ordinary people due to his convictions. He says that from his perspective, normal people like our hero are far too weak, and he cracks a completely intimidating and mocking smile. The man then introduces himself as Funaki Zenjiro and reveals he was hired to get rid of Makoto, telling him to give up any resistance. Our protagonist, however, isn't fazed in the slightest and asks if Funaki is also just someone's henchman. He reflects that ever since he entered this place, he's felt a strange sensation, and even though he knows he's weak, he can sense the energy the other guy is emitting. A purple aura begins to envelop Funaki's body, and our protagonist identifies it as Ryatsu, a kind of spiritual pressure, and after being completely covered in aura, Funaki Zenjiro charges forward and yells that he's going to send our protagonist to the other side in an instant. However, his blow ends up missing our protagonist. He's left confused, not understanding what happened. Makoto then grabs the big guy's head and says that the real weak one here is Funaki himself, and he slams his head into the ground, Trying to recover, Funaki grabs our protagonist's leg. He then begins to prepare his move. He throws the protagonist with full force against the wall, but Makoto quickly recovers. Funaki then admits he underestimated the kid and says he'll have to teach him a painful lesson. However, our protagonist didn't even get a scratch from Funaki's series of attacks. Makoto then rushes at him. With incredible speed, he prepares to attack the prisoner. With a powerful punch, Funaki is sent flying. With no chance to defend himself, he slams hard against the wall. The attack was so powerful that the brute even spits up blood. However, our boy wasn't done and was already preparing his next attack. Desperate, Funaki tries to defend himself, but the power difference was absurd, and Makoto sends him flying with a powerful kick. Throughout the entire fight, our protagonist didn't even break a sweat. Meanwhile, Funaki was completely beaten down. Completely losing it, the brute charges forward, screaming about how our hero dares to get so cocky. However, Makoto dodges with ease. Before the big guy could do anything, he's hit with a punch to the stomach. The blow is so powerful it makes the poor guy spit blood, and once again, he's thrown like he's a tennis ball. On his knees and in disbelief about what just happened, he wonders why he's getting beaten up like this. Our protagonist stands before him, now with a red aura of power emanating from his body. With his fist glowing with blue energy, he prepares to deliver the final blow and end the fight once and for all. With a final devastating punch, our protagonist hits Funaki Zenjiro square on and slams him to the ground. He then grabs the prisoner's head and, with a cold look, asks who's behind all of this. He continues to pressure the inmate to get the answers he needs. A moment later, our protagonist asks his second question, wanting to know where he got that Ryutsu. The scene cuts to the police commissioner's office, where Onaga Kaizu is yelling into the phone, asking what kind of monster that kid is. On the other end of the line, a voice responds dismissively, "A monster. He's just a failure from the Yamori family." Onaga, still a bit suspicious, says he hopes the kid can be eliminated without any major issues. The mysterious voice reassures him, saying he's hired the best and that, if everything goes well, he'll recommend him to be the new chief of police. Back in the cell, our boy is sitting in a chair, commenting that the muscular man has a lot of guts for not opening his mouth. Funaki then admits he underestimated him and reveals that our hero is far beyond the level of ordinary people like them. Our protagonist picks up on the word them and wonders if there are other cultivation practitioners in this world. The prisoner then begins to tell his story, revealing that a few years ago, he met an old monk. In a flashback, he remembers seeing the monk slice a giant tree in half with just one hand, effortlessly. At that time, the inmate's jaw dropped, completely shocked by that absurd display of power. Finally, he says the monk gifted him a bottle of divine water, which was the source of his strength. Continuing his story, Funaki Zenjiro explains that if he kept drinking the diluted divine water as the monk instructed, over a few years, his body would gradually transform into an extraordinary form. Our protagonist understands that what he calls divine water must actually be a spiritual liquid and becomes interested in visiting this so-called source. He thinks that spiritual sources only exist in places with a high concentration of energy and that their liquid is a very valuable resource for cultivation. Makoto then questions him why someone who has transcended a common human would obey orders from just anyone. The inmate reveals that his son suffers from a degenerative disease that requires very expensive medical treatments. With a look of pure frustration, he clenches his fist and says that the divine water didn't work on his son's illness, and all he can do is keep him alive. Because of this, he desperately yells that he needs to make more money as quickly as possible to find a cure. Our hero listens to the story and calmly says that this disease can be treated and that perhaps he can save the child. Funaki is completely shocked by the statement and yells, asking what he just said. Our protagonist explains that the water is a spiritual liquid and can be dangerous for normal people, but a special technique can amplify its properties. He then uses the healing property as an example and shows a green talisman he has in his hand. The prisoner, however, doubts him and questions what kind of effect a simple talisman could have. Without saying another word, our boy just activates the magical item, which releases a powerful green healing aura. The energy completely envelops the muscular man, who looks at his body in shock, realizing he has been fully healed. With the glowing talisman in his hand, our protagonist gives the prisoner a choice. With his red eyes, he tells the inmate to tell the truth and save his son, or simply perish right there. Funaki Zenjiro gives a small smirk, seeming to have made his decision. From there, he admits that, as expected, our boy is no ordinary person. He then reveals that the one who contacted him was a guy named Hashimoto Kosei. The scene then cuts to Hashimoto himself, who is on the phone complaining that someone got scared of a nobody from the Yaemori family. He's the owner of the Kozan Club and is in a super fancy room, telling them to proceed with the plan. With a very strange smile, he asks someone there what she wants to eat or drink. We then see a woman, all tied up and bruised, bound to a chair. The psycho approaches her and complains that she's rude for not knowing how to behave at the table. With a sick look in his eyes, he thinks about what he's going to do to her for fun. Without the slightest bit of pity, he violently rips the gag from her face. A moment later, he appears with a pair of pliers and a wicked smile, asking which tooth he should pull to teach teach her a lesson. The woman is terrified as the monster forces the tool into her mouth. The next image just shows how cruel and sadistic the real villain behind everything is. In the meantime, a butler approaches Hashimoto and informs him that he received a call from Lord Ama regarding the Yaemori situation. Wiping his hands, the villain replies that he's already asked some thugs to handle it and says to let them know he'll stop by the police station later. Back at the prison, the inmate tells our boy to accept this as thanks for the talisman. The muscular man then hands his necklace with a crucifix to our protagonist. Holding the object, our protagonist is surprised, noticing that it's a highly concentrated spiritual liquid. He thinks that if he sprays this liquid on the silver heart grass, it will bear fruit immediately, allowing him to refine a pill to reach the second stage of cultivation. Faced with the unexpected gift, our hero pockets the necklace and thanks him, saying it will be a great help. Funaki Zenjiro then warns him that from now on Hashimoto will be on his tail. With a serious look, he adds that people who get on that guy's bad side don't usually meet a pleasant end. Our protagonist, however, reassures him, telling him not to worry as long as he doesn't forget their deal. As for this Hashimoto fellow, with a sinister smile, he promises to say hello to the guy on his behalf. The scene then cuts to Nihai University, showing a new setting. A yellow sports car pulls into the parking lot, and an elegant leg steps out. A moment later, a very stylish woman in sunglasses gets out of the car with an air of superiority. Looking at a photo in her hands, she thinks that if she hadn't seen it with her own eyes, she would never have believed that the boy selling talismans was the famous exile from the Yaemori family. Finding the whole thing a huge coincidence, with a new goal in mind, the woman decides she'll ask the dean's office which class Makoto is in. Elsewhere at the university, Mochiyama is super annoyed, yelling that she can't just stand by while Makoto is taken away by corrupt cops because of her. At that exact moment, the office door slowly opens. Mochiyama is surprised to see Shizuru Shuga entering the room, while an older man watches the scene. The heiress of the Suga family overhears the conversation and asks if by any chance they're talking about Makoto. The scene cuts to the police station, where Officer Kaya slams his fist on his superior's desk, yelling that this is going too far. He continues his indignant lecture as they finally caught a dangerous criminal, and now the corrupt chief is just gonna let him go. Completely outraged, the honest officer points at Onaga and accuses him of abuse of authority. The police commissioner, however, remains calm and asks if Haruki has any proof, reminding him that insulting his superior is a serious crime. Undeterred, Kai gets closer and states that he knows his superior is up to something behind the scenes. Onaga challenges him to say what he knows, and the two stare each other down with intense tension in the air. Suddenly, the office door opens, and someone tries to block the entrance, saying the room is restricted. Mochiyama bursts in, pointing at the chief and demanding he release Makoto immediately, while Shizuru follows, apologizing. Onaga is irritated by the interruption and scolds his men for not even being able to keep outsiders out. With a suspicious look, he wonders who this woman is, as the boy from the Yaemori family shouldn't have any important support. Lighting a cigarette, the corrupt chief states that their friend is a suspect in a robbery and assault, and therefore cannot be released. Kai is furious with the lie and yells that it's absurd, asking since when he's been a suspect in something like that. Onaga, however, refuses to explain, saying that as the chief, he cannot leak internal information. Mochiyama jumps into the argument, questioning why the Yakuza members aren't in jail, since arresting Makoto and releasing the others is corruption. The commissioner loses his patience and threatens to arrest both of them for obstruction of justice if they don't leave immediately. Shizuru takes out her phone and places it on the desk with a defiant air. Calmly, she sits on the sofa and tells the corrupt cop to try it if he has the guts. Onaga gets really angry and orders his men to throw them both in a cell and shut them up. A moment later, several police officers approach to carry out their superior's order. Kaya yells once more that this is an abuse of authority while being held back by two colleagues. Shizuru mocks the chief and asks if he really thought he could silence them with false accusations. Onaga lets out a sarcastic laugh and says that insulting a government official will only worsen their sentence. At that moment, the heiress of the Suga family reminds him that the same Yakuza he released were doing some favors for him. The commissioner realizes the situation is getting complicated and his expression turns to pure rage. With an intimidating gaze, Shizuru implies that since he resolves things with favors, Makoto's situation could also be resolved with money. Onaga Keizu sits back, completely relaxed, and says it's natural for the powerful to have privileges and that their friend's fate was to end up this way. With a mocking smile, he continues his threat, creating a scenario where Haruki resists desperately, and everyone ends up losing their lives right there. The corrupt chief finishes by saying it wouldn't make a difference because he could just make up that story, leaving everyone completely tense. Shizuru, however, stays calm and, with a small smile, speaks into her phone, asking if Director Ogi heard that. On the other end of the line, a voice confirms they heard everything, and the police officers present are left speechless by the turn of events. Onaga starts to sweat and, with a panicked look, wonders if that's really the famous Director Ogi. The heiress of the Suga family sees seizes the moment to introduce herself and announces that for his involvement with anti-social forces, abuse of authority, and threatening a councilman's family, he is suspended. Hearing the news, the commissioner collapses into his chair, completely shocked, and asks who exactly she is. With a face full of dread, he realizes she's from the Suga family and can't understand why the prisoner has connections to such powerful people. The scene cuts back to the prison hallway, showing the cell where our protagonist is. A moment later, the crucifix he got from Funaki begins to glow with an intense light. Holding the necklace, our hero notes that the amount of spiritual liquid is very small and that he can only use it once. Suddenly, our protagonist hears a noise and realizes someone is approaching. A pair of high-heeled boots appears outside the cell, catching our boy's attention. A moment later, the cell door slowly opens, revealing the unexpected visitor. With a serious look, our protagonist observes the unexpected visitor who has arrived at his cell. The stylish woman, along with Machiyama, smiles and says it's been a long time since they've seen each other. Elsewhere, Hashimoto is having a fit of rage, smashing everything in his office and yelling that all his goons are useless. Sitting in his armchair, he complains that one is almost on the other side and the other went to prison, calling them both worthless. With a worried look, he thinks that if the Ama family's mission isn't completed, he won't be safe either. One of his bodyguards approaches and asks what Lord Akamasa is going to do. Hashimoto stands up and decides he will send his best man to show his sincerity to the Ama family. With his eyes glowing purple, he declares he will get rid of that trash with his own hands. The scene cuts to our boy watching TV, complaining that because he bought the materials, he's broke again. Looking at all the ingredients gathered on the floor, he summons his alchemy cauldron and yells to begin. The cauldron begins to glow with a golden light, and several beams of energy concentrate on it. With a focused gaze, our hero gives the order to refine the key-gathering pill. A moment later, he appears with the finished pill in his fingers, thinking that the method is simple, but for this world, the effect is more than enough. With the pill in hand, he finally starts training, thinking it's been a while since he used the Cloud Shadow step, leaving the little dog impressed. With a confident smile, he clenches his fist and states that at this speed, not even bullets could hit him. Back in his apartment, our protagonist thinks he's used up all the spiritual liquid he got and, to keep evolving, he needs more items with energy, remembering the source Funaki mentioned. Checking his balance on his phone, he realizes that going the normal route is too risky and decides he'll use an influential contact the ex-prisoner gave him. Holding a card, he calculates that just the entry procedures cost 2 million yen and that the money he has is nowhere near enough. At that moment, a TV ad catches his attention about a Sugo beauty injection that promises to restore youth with a single needle. The commercial continues, showing the product's popularity and announcing a sale with the lowest price in history at 39,980 yen. Faced with that information, our protagonist picks up a small blue box from the table. With a confident smile, he reflects that the women of this world are obsessed with youth and that the upcoming party is the perfect opportunity. The scene then flashes back 5 hours, showing our hero having dinner with Shizuru, thinking he can't believe she's the daughter of Councilman Suga. He understands that's why she was able to contact the police chief directly. The young woman then interrupts him and says she called him there because she has a favor to ask. Our protagonist stops eating and asks what kind of favor. She asks if he knows the Sugao building, and our boy replies, asking if she means the city's largest cosmetics manufacturer. Shizuru reveals with a smile that she's actually the owner of it all, and that the following night, she's throwing a party to celebrate her mother's recovery. The heiress of the Suga family then invites him to the event, leaving him completely surprised. The image then cuts to a night view of the gigantic cosmetics company building. Back in the present, our protagonist holds the small blue box and thinks about the Joyan pill, a common item among the female cultivators of his former continent. Opening the box, he reveals a shiny white pill and calculates that if he targets wealthy women, selling just 3 or 4 of them would get him the 2 million yen he needs. With the plan in mind, our protagonist understands that the perfect opportunity is right in front of him. The scene then cuts to the party, where Shizuru's aunt and uncle are pressuring her, saying that a woman over 30 is no longer young. The uncle even compares her to her older sister, Masami, saying that if she doesn't get married soon, she'll end up a spinster. With a cigar in his mouth, he continues his lecture, accusing her of selfishness for not contributing more to the clan now that she's older. Without any compassion, the man calls her a plague and mocks her for not being able to say anything in her defense. With an intimidating look, he claims they are saying this for everyone's good, and that now that her sister has woken up, she should convince Shizuru to accept the marriage proposal. At that exact moment, Shizuru's mother starts coughing, and the young woman rushes to help her, asking if she's okay. The uncle, however, ignores the scene and says that a woman of a good age who can't get married is like defective merchandise, suggesting she marry someone from the Oko family to avoid problems. Masami then intervenes, saying she has her own thoughts on the matter. The uncle scoffs at her idea, asking asking what thoughts those might be. Completely irritated, he yells that it's just selfishness on her part. With a skeptical look, he questions if she really believes she can regain her youth with a simple cosmetic product. Suddenly, a voice echoes through the hall, stating that he can do just that, leaving all the guests completely surprised. Our protagonist appears in the hall and says that calling a renowned woman in the cosmetics industry defective merchandise, and with his eyes glowing red, he completes the sentence, saying there's a limit to rudeness. Shizuru's uncle is terrified by the sudden appearance and yells, asking who he is. Completely losing it, the man starts calling for security, while all the guests stare at the commotion. Shizuru then approaches and introduces him as Makoto Yaemori, the benefactor who saved her mother's life. Mrs. Suga herself, now in a wheelchair, thanks him for selling the talisman to her daughter. With a gentle smile, our hero says there's no need for thanks. The uncle, however, continues his scorn, calling him a con artist and claiming that the lady's recovery was thanks to the power of medicine, not some suspicious item. Our protagonist then introduces himself as a researcher with knowledge of time and value, and also as a business partner of President Suga. One of the relatives butts in and asks what kind of business he would have there, and our boy replies that they were discussing whether youth can be restored with cosmetics. Holding the small blue box, he states that he will show them the answer to that question right there. He then turns to Masami and asks if she would mind lending him a hand, surprising the woman. With a smile, he offers the box and asks her to eat the item inside. The older sister takes the box and looks up with an expression of hope and admiration. Our protagonist opens the box, revealing the Joyan pill, and says this is what will solve the problem. Shizuru's uncle doesn't accept the situation and points at our protagonist, calling him a liar and saying the pill is probably poisoned. Faced with the accusation, Masami becomes unsure and, with the box in her hand, asks if it's really safe to take it. Shizuru then intervenes to defend him and, with a confident smile, asserts that Makoto is trustworthy and that she wouldn't mind taking it herself. Her mother agrees and, from her wheelchair, adds that he is her savior and she trusts him completely. The other guests, however, are not convinced, and some men in the back comment that there's no way a rejuvenation medicine actually exists. Our boy approaches Masami and whispers, asking if she doesn't want to reclaim the feelings of her youth, leaving her completely flustered. A flood of bad memories hits her, with voices mocking her for being old and useless. Realizing he's right, she looks down, determined. Making her decision, she declares she will try it and takes the shiny white pill. Without a second thought, the woman puts the pill in her mouth, ready for whatever comes next. Her uncle and aunt are in absolute shock, unable to believe she actually ate the strange pill. For a moment, nothing happens and Masami feels no change, beginning to wonder if it was all a lie or worse, if it was poison. The uncle lets out a victorious laugh, saying he knew it was all nonsense and mocks our protagonist for being a terrible researcher. But just then, a golden, flame-like energy appears in Masami's eye, signaling that a powerful transformation is beginning. A servant rushes in with a large mirror, and everyone is left speechless, as her reflection is that of a young woman, exactly as she was in her youth. The uncle and aunt are completely stunned by the miracle, their jaws on the floor as they stammer in disbelief at what they're seeing. Impressed by the result, one of the guests approaches our protagonist and asks how much the pill costs, as she wants one too. Seeing this, all the wealthy guests at the party go wild and start an impromptu auction, offering increasingly higher amounts for the pill. Shizuru's uncle watches the scene with contempt, complaining about all the fuss over a single pill. With the box in his hand, our hero becomes the center of attention as the guests realize the true value lies in the alchemy technique and distribution rights. Shizuru's aunt tries to warn her husband that their company will go bankrupt if they get into this, but he tells her to shut up and not to talk back. With a malicious smile, the man hatches a plan to string the boy along, buy time, and marry Shizuru into the Oko family to get the investment and all the pills he wants. A portly man covered in jewelry introduces himself as a member of the Kozan group and offers 4 million yen for the distribution rights. Immediately after, another guest from the Rinkyo group tops the offer, shouting that they'll give 20 million. A man in a suit then intervenes to calm the crowd, reminding everyone that Makoto is Shizuru's guest and they shouldn't be talking business. With a fake smile, he turns to our boy and invites him to talk in a more private place. Alone with him, the man makes his proposal, 30 million for a 30-70 profit-sharing deal. Our protagonist questions if the offer is 70% for him and 30 for the company. The man bursts out laughing, saying it's the other way around, 70 for them and 30 for the boy, bragging about the Hoshisu family's connections. At that moment, Shizuru appears and with a cold voice, asks what kind of connections the Hoshisu family even has. Her uncle and aunt are shocked by their niece's attitude, and the man reminds her that she's family and shouldn't act that way. Shizuru Shuga then confronts her relative, questioning his talk about family, reminding him that he didn't think much about it when he lost 160 million yen, using their grandmother's company as collateral. Her uncle panics completely and starts stuttering, saying it's absurd and that she doesn't know what she's talking about. With her phone in hand, the Harris of the Suga family threatens him, asking if she should read aloud the fund withdrawals from the Uko family and the collection notices from the bank. At this revelation, Shizuru's mother and aunt are completely shocked, and Masami questions if he really used their mother's company as collateral. Terrified, the man starts to sweat and asks how she found out all of that and if she investigated them. The young woman continues to expose the scoundrel, accusing him of coming only to squeeze money out of her mother, planning to use the same tactic he used on their grandmother to leave her with nothing. With intense anger and not an ounce of patience, she states she won't give him a single cent. She then reveals to everyone that his plan was to profit without investing anything, and that he didn't even have the 30 million yen for the deal, accusing him of trying to scam our hero. Desperate, the uncle crawls on the floor and denies everything, shouting that it wasn't like that at all and she misunderstood. He then appeals to his sister for help, playing the victim, but she looks at him with pure disappointment and reminds him she gave him the company because he promised to change his life. The man continues to beg, grabbing her dress and playing the victim, saying he's the only man left in the Hoshisu family. Shizuru's mother, however, with a sad but firm expression, says that even if she ignored the family's feelings, embezzling their mother's inheritance is absolutely unforgivable. Without any pity, she kicks him away with surprising force and warns him that he'll have to face the consequences of his actions alone. Lying on the floor, completely defeated, the uncle is devastated and asks with tears in his eyes if she's really abandoning him. Shizuru then approaches with our protagonist and gives her relative a choice: either he faces legal execution and spends the rest of his life buried in debt, or he can sell the company to her for 1 yen, and the young woman even scoffs, saying that if anyone wants that bankrupt company, she might even let them have it. Seeing the scoundrel's humiliation, some guests laugh and comment that he got what he deserved. A moment later, Shizuru Shuga turns to our protagonist and says there are many business professionals at the party. With a smile, she offers to introduce him to some contacts if he needs help. Our protagonist then comments that 40 million yen for the distribution rights is a fair price and that he would take 80% of the profits, but the woman warns him to choose carefully, as the people there are real sharks. The Harris of the Suga family, however, states that when it comes to business, she feels safe leaving things in his hands. The scene cuts to later that night, and the woman gives our hero a ride in her yellow sports car, complimenting the place where he lives. Our protagonist gets out of the car and humbly replies that the house is just rented. With a smile, he thanks her for the ride, saying it was a great help. Shizuru extends her hand and tells him not to worry because they're friends, leaving our boy completely surprised by the declaration. He stands there, watching her car drive away and disappear into the darkness of the night. Looking at the full moon in the sky, our protagonist reflects that maybe this new life isn't so bad after all. With that thought, he turns and slowly walks toward his front door. Getting closer, our hero reaches for the doorknob, ready to go inside. The door creaks open, revealing the dark and silent interior of his apartment. But as he steps inside, he's met with a pool of blood on the floor and the blood-stained paws of his little dog. He then sees the terrible sight of his little friend lying on the floor with a knife stuck in its back. With his eyes glowing purple with pure rage, he wonders what the heck is going on here. In a flashback, we see a hooded man watching the house and reporting to his boss that Makoto has arrived with a woman, likely his girlfriend. On the other end of the line, a voice orders him to capture her, because when they make him feel despair, Lord Ama will be satisfied. Back in the present, the hooded man observes the pool of blood and hopes. He likes the present he left for him, with the shocking image of the injured little dog. Our protagonist runs desperately toward his pet, which is lying motionless on the floor. Kneeling beside it, our boy carefully reaches out to check on its condition. With a look of relief, he realizes the little dog is still breathing and that a healing talisman might be able to save it. Suddenly, a man with a knife between his teeth leaps from the ceiling, ready to attack our distracted hero. But our protagonist senses the ambush, and a blue aura of energy surrounds him. The attacker pulls out a sword and holds it with both hands, ready to deliver a deadly blow. However, before he could do anything, our protagonist hits him with a punch straight to the face. With the little dog in his arms, he finishes off the enemy with a devastating kick that sends him flying. The noise of the commotion draws attention, and suddenly, a group of armed thugs appears, wondering what happened. Our protagonist notices the reinforcements arrive and carefully places the little dog on the floor, telling it to hide. Looking at the defeated attacker, he understands the enemy wasn't alone, and that more people were waiting nearby. With a purple aura of power emanating from his body, he faces the new group and mockingly asks if he should take them down one by one. The leader of the thugs isn't intimidated and yells for his men to advance and give the kid a beating, but orders them not to eliminate him. So, one of the henchmen charges forward with a blade in hand, striking quickly toward our hero. But our protagonist doesn't even flinch, and with his eyes glowing purple, he prepares a devastating counter-attack. With a single movement, he unleashes a wave of energy that sends the attacker flying and shatters the floor into pieces. Shrouded in his aura of power, with half his face in shadow, he calmly says that was just the first one. Another thug with a top knot isn't phased and charges with a metal pipe, yelling at our boy not to get so cocky. Our protagonist, however, dodges the attack with absurd ease, showing that their levels are completely different. A moment later, he lands a powerful blow right in the thug's chest, who screams in pain from the force of the impact. Without giving the guy time to recover, our protagonist grabs him by the neck and lifts him off the ground effortlessly. With a precise and swift kick to the back of the neck, he takes out the second enemy once and for all. The attacker falls to the ground, and our hero announces that was number 2, as the other thugs prepare to attack. Seeing our protagonist's absurd strength, the leader of the thugs changes his mind and yells for his men to shoot his arms and legs. Our boy, however, isn't intimidated in the slightest and charges forward with incredible speed, promising he'll get every single one of them. With his eyes glowing red with pure rage, he completes the threat, saying the beating will only stop when they start talking. The scene cuts to Hashimoto's lair, where he observes a table full of torture instruments with a sinister smile. He then turns to Shizuru, who is tied and gagged, and comments that she is the dream woman of every man in the city. With a scalpel in hand, he approaches her and confirms she is Shizuru Shuga, the daughter of Councilman Kenji Suga, as the young woman just writhes in pain. At that moment, his cell phone starts to ring, and Hashimoto picks it up to answer the call. With an air of boredom, he asks if the mission is over and if they haven't eliminated the kid. On the other end of the line, our protagonist replies that his goons won't be waking up ever again, leaving Hashimoto completely shocked and in disbelief. Our hero then mocks him, saying the villain really knows how to surprise someone. The psycho doesn't let it faze him and, with a malicious smile, reveals he's captured the councilman's daughter and that she's a beautiful prize. The image then shows the fury in our boy's eyes, completely consumed by hatred. With a serious and threatening voice, he warns that he's on his way to get her and tells the lowlife not to involve innocent people in this. Hashimoto explodes with anger, calling our protagonist a cheeky brat and a real Hothiot. To provoke him even further, he gives him a 40-minute deadline and threatens that if our hero doesn't arrive in time, he'll show all the citizens of the city how he's going to slice up the girl. With a mocking tone, Hashimoto challenges him to find their location on his own and hangs up. Our protagonist stares at the phone screen for a moment, feeling the anger build inside him. Clenching his fist, he crushes the device and promises he's coming for the villain right now. In his lair, the psycho decides he'll film a taunting video first and approaches Shizuru, who is tied to a gurney. The young woman tries to resist, but he holds her down forcefully, tearing part of her dress. Suddenly, he gets annoyed by something and wonders what the heck is going on now. 2 of his bodyguards appear at the door and report that the warehouse's fire suppression system has been triggered. Hashimoto gets furious and yells that he ordered the alarm to be deactivated in case the police showed up. He decides to check it himself, ordering his men to keep an eye on things. In the dark hallway, he asks who's there and what that person is doing. All of a sudden, the warehouse door bursts open violently, and one of his men is thrown inside. The image shows the goon lying on the floor and the room completely trashed. Tied to the gurney, Shizuru whispers Makoto's name with a sliver of hope. The scene then flashes back 1 hour, and we see Funaki Zenjiro on his motorcycle, complaining that he came all this way just to deliver a letter, and the guy won't even answer his phone. With a piece of paper in hand, he confirms the address and gets ready to make the delivery. Looking at the house, he wonders if this is really where Makoto lives. Outside, Funaki Zenjiro overhears a hooded man reporting to someone named Lord Hashimoto that Makoto has returned home and is confused. The voice continues, saying not to worry as 6 of his assassins will give him a beating just for fun. The man also reports that they've captured the woman who was with the kid and that they'll take her along. Hiding, Funaki is shocked to realize that Akamasa Hashimoto has sent assassins to Makoto's house and even kidnapped a woman. He watches the goon's car speed away, taking the young woman with them. With his helmet on, the ex-prisoner gets on his motorcycle and decides he'll track them and send the coordinates to our hero. He then speeds off, following the thug's car closely through the dark city streets. The scene cuts to our protagonist, who answers his phone and is surprised to hear Funaki's voice on the other end. The muscular man explains that he finally got through and that it seems Akamasa Hashimoto has kidnapped our boy's girlfriend. On the other end of the line, Funaki asks if the address is 30 Arami Street. Our protagonist then steps on the head of one of the defeated goons and, with a glowing talisman, asks how he knew the location. Our protagonist says he needs him to lend a hand, as he needs to get his friend out of there. With his eyes glowing red with pure rage, he swears swears he will personally drag Hashimoto to the underworld. The scene returns to the villain's lair, where he walks through a luxurious, well-lit hallway. His bodyguards inform him that the warehouse's alarm system was triggered, and he gets furious, yelling that he ordered the alarm cut in case the police showed up. Funaki Zenjiro watches as Hashimoto heads toward the warehouse, leaving his bodyguards behind. The two goons in suits and sunglasses start complaining about their lives, saying it's already hard enough to make a living and that they can't even touch the girl who's in there. Suddenly, one of them hears a noise and asks who's there, looking around suspiciously. Out of nowhere, Funaki appears, shrouded in a purple aura of power, and charges toward them, leaving them completely shocked by his appearance. With his eyes glowing red, he ironically apologizes, asking them to bear with the darkness for a moment. Without wasting any time, he knocks out the first bodyguard with a solid punch to the chest. The muscular man then stands in front of the door he just broke down, while the defeated goon lies on the floor. Looking at Shizuru Shuga, who is unconscious on a gurney, he says that Makoto owes him one for this. With that in mind, the big guy picks her up and says they need to get out of there as quickly as possible. Rushing through the luxurious hallway, he repeats that they have to bail before anyone realizes what's happening. Reaching a door, Funaki Zenjiro says the car is in the garden, and that the guards who went to check the alarm shouldn't be back anytime soon. However, just as he was about to open the door, a bullet zips right past him. The shot hits him square on, and the ex-prisoner yells in pain as he falls to the ground. Lying on the floor, all banged up, he tries to protect the young woman, who is still unconscious, in his arms. Across the hall, Hashimoto Kozi appears with a gun in hand, bragging about his shooting skills while his goons applaud him. Funaki starts to sweat and wonders why on earth they came back so quickly. With a mocking smile, the villain says he's impressed he had the guts to show his face. Even wounded, the muscular man tries to get up and, with a forced smile, greets Lord Akamasa. The cycle lets out a laugh and says this is a wonderful day, as everyone came here just to be punished by him. With a completely sick look and his eyes glowing purple, he says he's getting very excited about the situation. Surrounded by his purple aura, Funaki Zenjiro says that's hardly the case, and that the villain can only say he's defeated him after he's actually done it. Meanwhile, outside the mansion, our protagonist finally arrives and is met by several bodyguards at the entrance. The guards quickly spot him, and one of them yells, asking who's there. Our protagonist then emerges from the shadows with a red aura and a completely menacing look. One of the goons approaches from behind and puts a hand on our boy's shoulder, mockingly asking if he's listening. Without even turning around, Makoto lands a punch straight to the guard's face, shattering his sunglasses into pieces. The impact sends the bodyguard flying, while the other goons watch, completely shocked by his speed. Faced with the situation, the remaining guards draw their batons and prepare for a fight, looking a bit scared. Our hero, however, stands still as two of the enemies charge at him from the sides. With a swift movement and surrounded by red energy, he takes down both attackers at the same time. A moment later, the goons fall to the ground, completely defeated, and our protagonist continues on his way, without even a glance back. With his eyes glowing red with pure rage, he announces to Hashimoto that he has arrived. Back in the main hall, the muscular man spits up a lot of blood from the gunshot wound. Lying on the floor and surrounded by enemies, he complains that he's completely outnumbered. Looking at the unconscious girl, he laments that he couldn't even save one woman, and says he shouldn't have listened to Makoto's request. With the gun in his hand, the villain says that when he takes his last breath, he'll send the others to meet him, but before that he's going to chop them into little pieces, all with a completely crazed smile. Suddenly, the hall door explodes into 1,000 pieces with a deafening noise. Surprised by the explosion, Hashimoto Kosi yells, asking who's there. From the middle of the smoke, a silhouette surrounded by a purple aura appears at the entrance. With eyes red with pure rage, our protagonist replies that he's the one who came to send him to the underworld. Seeing our hero, the muscular man says he took his sweet time getting there, as several guards lie defeated around him. Our boy then tosses a healing talisman to his new ally and tells him to use it. He adds that the magical item works, just like the last one. Completely furious, Hashimoto loses his patience and yells for his men to finish off the kid. A moment later, the villain's bodyguards open fire, and a storm of bullets heads toward our protagonist. But our protagonist states that bullets don't work against a cultivator who has mastered the Cloud Shadow step. He then charges forward at an insane speed and starts taking down the goons one by one. The villain's jaw drops as he wonders what kind of speed that is. Giving the enemies no chance, our protagonist continues the massacre, dodging bullets and knocking out everyone in his path. Seeing his men being defeated with ease, Hashimoto Kosei is completely terrified as our protagonist walks toward him. In this situation, the villain yells to get to safety and runs desperately towards a door. As he escapes, he thinks that this isn't what he was told and that the kid moves like an elite member of a prestigious family. Reaching the door, he pounds on it and yells for them to open up as he's in a hurry. However, when he types the password on the the keypad, the door doesn't open, an incorrect password message appears. Completely desperate and with nowhere to go, the psycho screams in pure frustration. At that moment, one of his own goons is thrown with full force against the wall right beside him. Sweating profusely, he tries to calm himself, thinking that our boy can't challenge his powerful sponsor. Unable to take the pressure, the villain yells that he'll tell him everything and reveals that the one after our hero's life is Lord Ama. With a defeated goon in one hand and a knife in the other, our protagonist appears and asks who this Lord Ama is. With his eyes glowing orange, he warns that if the guy keeps playing dumb, he's going to feel unbearable pain. Terrified, Hashimoto reveals it's Joe Ama, the heir of the Ama family, and that they want to erase our protagonist because of a political marriage. Our protagonist remembers that the previous owner of this body had no memory of Yuki Amaya and concludes the rumor was created to frame him. With a confident smile, the villain says that only the Ama family could pull something like that off and that it's in our hero's best interest to let him go. Our protagonist, however, realizes that if Joe Ama is that powerful, he must also be a cultivator. With an air of superiority, the villain says that if our hero lets him go, he might even help him, as he'll see how much he's worth over time. Our protagonist, however, just looks at him with disdain and questions this worth. He speaks of Hashimoto Kosi with a forced smile and surrounded by his defeated goons, asks if our boy finally gets it, but without a single word, our protagonist lands a devastating punch right in the middle of the villain's face. The blow is so powerful that the psycho is sent flying backward with no chance to defend against the attack. He flies through the air and lands with a splash in a pool, where one of the trapped girls screams in fear. The image then reveals that several women were chained and injured in that place, like prisoners. Seeing this horrific scene, our protagonist's face fills with pure hatred and contempt. The scene shows the hall with all the defeated goons and the trapped women as our hero approaches the villain, his face contorted with rage. Our protagonist says he thinks they can explain as much better than he can. He then uses his knife and, with a swift movement, cuts the chains holding the women. With the blade flashing, the chains break into pieces, freeing all the prisoners at once. A moment later, the kid throws the knife on the ground right in front of the newly saved women. With a cold look, he turns and says they can do whatever they want with that monster. Terrified and surrounded by his former victims, Hashimoto begs for his life, saying he has value and money and that he'll give them whatever they want. With the knife in her hand, one of the women says they don't want anything he's offering. With a look full of hatred, she finishes the sentence, saying that sending him to the underworld is more than enough for them. The scene then cuts to the main hall, where our hero uses his energy to heal Shizuru, who is unconscious on the couch. The muscular man warns him that he needs to get out of there, as the police will arrive any moment, and our protagonist asks if he's sure. With a calm look, the kid says he'll be back as soon as he hands the girl over to the authorities. Funaki Zenjiro then questions him about what he's going to do now that he has the information he wanted. With a determined look, our hero reveals he's going to investigate the Ama family, but thinks he's completely outnumbered. Back at his apartment, our protagonist is doing push-ups on the floor while his little dog sleeps peacefully. He reflects that although he defeated Hashimoto, his partner is still out there, and he needs to find and crush him as quickly as possible. Suddenly, the little dog wakes up and barks at the door, as if it sensed someone's presence. Our protagonist opens the door and is met by a man in a suit who greets him as Lord Yimori. The man introduces himself and says he has a delivery from President Suga and also a message for him. Our boy is confused by the message and wonders what the girl is planning. With that, he opens his bedroom door while holding the doorknob firmly. A moment later, he appears, talking on the phone, and says he received an invitation but wonders what the suit is for. On the other end of the line, Shizuru Shuga confirms he received the invitation and reveals that the Hoshisu family is throwing a party. Holding the envelope, our protagonist is surprised and asks if he should also go to the Hoshisu family's event. A memory hits him and he asks, completely shocked, if his ex-fiancée will be there. A drop of sweat runs down his face as he starts to understand the situation. The young woman then confirms that it's the daughter of the Amaya family, Yuki Amaya. The scene cuts to the party where Shizuru introduces two powerful businessmen who manage the business world of Konkai City. Already dressed in an elegant suit, our boy wonders if they also want to get close to the Hoshisu family. The Harris of the Suga family explains that just being a relative of the Amaya family is enough to make everyone desperate for a connection. With a smile, she adds that not to mention the Amaya family's daughter, who is about to arrive. The image then shows the luxurious ballroom with several important guests scattered around. Suddenly, our protagonist senses a spiritual energy and wonders if that's the ex-fiancée of this body's previous owner. With a serious and focused look, he watches the mysterious woman's arrival. A moment later, the two are introduced as Yuki Amaya and Nana Hoshisu, the current head of the Hoshisu family. A bluish aura surrounds Yuki, confirming that she also possesses some kind of spiritual spiritual power. Our protagonist notices this and thinks she must know this Ama person and that he'll have to ask her about it later. With a radiant smile, Shizuru Shuga approaches the head of the family and greets her as Aunt Nana, saying she looks very well. The young woman then thanks her for her concern and says her mother is recovering little by little. A moment later, the heiress of the Suga family shows a box with a gift and reveals she brought some Joyan pills from her mother. Seeing the gift, Nana Hoshizu is surprised and asks if those are the famous Joyan pills. Yuki Amaya, who is standing beside her, is also shocked to see the magical item and the glow it emits. Holding the pill, Nana praises its excellent quality, saying it's the pinnacle of spiritual pills and that the person who refined it must have considerable skill. The head of the family comments that she has met masters of the alchemy world but wonders who refined this pill, as it doesn't even have an alchemical seal. With a proud smile, the young woman reveals that her friend and business partner refined them and introduces our protagonist as Makoto Yimori. Upon hearing the name, the two women are completely stunned and can't believe what they just heard. Nana then recognizes him, saying she used to hold him when he was little and that for him to be able to refine Joyan pills, the Yamori family truly has no eye for talent. Yuki Amaya, however, with a serious expression, interrupts her aunt, getting her attention. The older woman continues, saying that if they had known of his talent, he would have been welcomed into the Amaya family long ago. Observing the scene, our hero thinks that, as he imagined, the noble families have mastered cultivation methods, although they are far inferior to the techniques of the Loyu continent. Yuki, however, states that with his status, having such a skill means nothing, and her aunt seems to agree with some reluctance. Even so, Nana is still impressed by the young man's ability and questions him about who his master is. With a serious look, our protagonist thinks about the question of his master and remembers a woman from his past. The image shows the back of a woman with long, brown hair in a dark setting. Back at the party, the young man replies that it's just a hobby and that he doesn't have a master, but he has something more important to ask. Suddenly, an excited voice rings out in the hall, and a man in a white suit wishes Aunt Nana happy birthday. The group of guests watches the man and his personal bodyguard arrive. One of the guests whispers and reveals that he is the heir of the Ama family and that he saw him at a party in Kyojo last year. Nana Hoshizu turns and realizes that Joe has also come to the party, which surprises her a little. Our protagonist becomes alert upon hearing the name and can't believe his enemy is here. Joe then turns to the heiress of the Suga family and politely asks who she is. Nana quickly introduces her as Shizuru Shuga of the Suga family. Our hero observes their interaction with a suspicious look and a slight smile on his face. Joe Ama, the heir of the Ama family, extends his hand to greet her, formally introducing himself. With a firm handshake, he says he's heard many rumors about her, and then turns to our boy. He then asks who the young man is, and our protagonist greets him with a handshake. With a blue aura emanating from his body, our protagonist introduces himself as Makoto Yamori. During the handshake, our protagonist thinks that normal cultivators hide their strength, but if he channels his own energy into the enemy's channels. With that, Joe Ama's meridians glow intensely, revealing his entire spiritual energy system and leaving him completely shocked. The heir of the Ama family tries to hide his surprise and asks if he is Mr. Yamori. With a forced smile, he says it's an honor to meet him, trying to maintain his composure. A moment later, he turns to Yuki and asks how things have been lately to divert attention. Our protagonist, however, finds the whole situation very strange and becomes suspicious. He thinks that even as they talk, he can't sense any energy fluctuations and wonders if the guy really isn't a cultivator. With a smile on his face, Joe Ama continues the conversation, but our hero notices that he didn't even show any killing intent upon hearing his name. The scene then cuts to the ballroom, showing the guests enjoying dinner. Everyone seems to be having a good time with the luxurious food and drinks. A man then gets on stage and announces that a dance party will take place after the meal and asks everyone to gather in the hall. A moment later, several couples begin to dance in the beautifully decorated and lit ballroom. Away from everyone, our protagonist reflects that Ama is not a cultivator and questions if he was deceived. With a thoughtful look, he walks through the hall, wondering what the purpose of that whole lie could be. On the other side of the party, Shizuru Shuga watches him with a glass in her hand, noticing that something is bothering him. A man approaches Shizuru Shuga and asks her to dance with him. With a look of disinterest, the young woman apologizes and tells him to ask someone else. One of the guests comments that everyone is being rejected and that even the young master of the Katajiri family was turned down. Another young man adds that there aren't many men who could catch her eye, but one of them interrupts him and points at something. With a look of astonishment, the guest asks what's happening over over there. Yuki Amaya turns and notices that Shizuru is approaching someone with interest. With a smile on her face, the heiress of the Suka family calls our protagonist by his name. Our boy elegantly extends his hand, inviting her to dance. The two men who were gossiping are left speechless, unable to believe what they're seeing. On the other side of the hall, Joe Ama watches the scene with his bodyguard by his side. The image cuts to outside the party, where one of Joe's men calls for him to approach. Several bodyguards surround the area as the heir of the Ama family walks toward a black limousine. Before getting into the car, he gives the order for no one to approach the vehicle. The limousine then speeds off, its taillights glowing. The image shows the car quickly driving away and disappearing into the darkness of the night. The two men who were watching comment on what Joe Ama might be doing alone with his bodyguard. One of them reveals he heard that any bodyguard he chooses starts acting strangely and even forgets their own family. The scene cuts to inside the limousine, where a man slaps Joe across the face. With a furious look, the man calls him a brat and asks how he dares to hold another woman's hand in front of Yuki. With tears in his eyes, Joe deeply apologizes for his mistake. The mysterious man then threatens him, saying that if he can't even handle something as simple as that, he shouldn't expect a peaceful end, and the image reveals that this is the real Joe Ama, the hero of the family. Back in the parking lot, the limousine door opens, and an elegant foot steps out of the car. The real Joe Ama gets out of the vehicle as his men greet him respectfully. He then calls two of his bodyguards and tells them to accompany him to the hall. One of the men who was watching thinks that, just as the rumors said, only one person got out of the car. The image then reveals that the other Joe is actually tied and gagged in the back seat of the limousine. With tears streaming down his face, the imposter writhes in pain and despair. The scene returns to the party, where a band is playing for the guests. The real Joe Ama approaches Yuki and apologizes, saying something urgent came up. Yuki Amaya notices the commotion in the hall and becomes curious about what's happening. Shizuru Shuga is impressed to see Joe Ama talking with her aunt and Yuki. The guests quickly recognize Shizuru and comment on who her dance partner is, as they've never seen him before. With flushed cheeks, the heiress of the Suga family dances gracefully to the music. Our protagonist also seems a bit shy as he leads the dance across the floor. With a smooth and precise movement, he presses one of the keys on the nearby piano. The couple continues to dance in perfect harmony, drawing the gazes of everyone present. With a charming smile, the young woman compliments him, saying he's a great dancer. Our protagonist gets flustered by the compliment but remembers some important advice. Shizuru reminds him that if they want to sell the Joyan pill to the Hoshisu family, he needs to match the party's atmosphere. With a relieved smile, our hero thinks that the ballroom dancing skill of this body's previous owner is finally paying off. Nana Hoshizu then asks Yuki if she didn't know Makoto was such a skilled dancer, but she replies that he's just a commoner. The older woman, however, notices that her niece was watching very intently. Joe Ama approaches and comments that it seems Makoto also has a talent for dancing. With a smile, he asks if Nana really doesn't know Makoto, and she confirms that today was the first time they met. With a suspicious look, Nana Hoshizu asks if even with all the power of the Ama family, they can't investigate the past of a disowned child. Joe Ama tries to calm the situation, saying they can't cause trouble in the Hoshisu family's territory. Nana, however, states that the means are irrelevant and that Makoto's aptitude for alchemy is extraordinary. With a determined look, she says she can't let him run loose any longer. Joe perceives the threat and thinks that if Yuki weren't there, he would have gotten rid of that woman long ago. He then looks at our protagonist with contempt, calling him a piece of trash. In another corner of the party, two guests are gossiping, and one of them comments that he heard the man with Shizuru is a Yaemori. One of them then remembers he was Yuki's ex-fiancé, and the other questions if he came knowing Lord Joe would be present. The guest continues the gossip, saying that now that he's been kicked out of the family, his only redemption is to suck up to Yuki and the Amaya family. He concludes that's why the kid is using the girl to try to regain his noble status. Suddenly, Yuki gets up from the table and announces she's tired and is going home first. Joe tries to convince her to stay and enjoy the party a little longer, but she ignores him. With a sheepish smile, Nana comments on her niece's attitude and says goodbye. With a glass of wine in hand, our protagonist watches the scene, not understanding what's happening. Yuki then turns to him with a furious look and says she knows exactly what he's thinking, telling him to discard those wicked thoughts immediately. With an air of superiority, Yuki Amaya states that the relationships between noble families are much more complex than he imagines. Our protagonist, however, doesn't understand a thing she's saying and is completely confused. She then advises him, saying that refining pills won't make him rich, but it will help with his expenses. With a look of disdain, he takes a sip of his drink, completely ignoring her lecture. Yuki finishes her speech by telling him to focus on himself and not to try to get close to her. With an ironic smile, our protagonist questions who she's talking about, referring to himself. The young woman is surprised by his response and doesn't understand his confident attitude. The young man then reveals that the spiritual energy she's emitting is unintentional and that she can't control it. Surrounded Surrounded by a blue aura of power, Yuki is shocked and asks how he knows that. Our protagonist explains that forcing cultivation might speed up absorption, but it will ruin her body. The two face each other at a table away from the other guests as they discuss the situation. With a confident smile, our hero says he can fix her problem, making her even more suspicious. Yuki, however, doubts him and asks if he really expects her to believe that. Unfazed, he replies that whether she believes it or not, she's the one who will lose out if she doesn't accept his help. With a serious look, he warns her that her time is running out, leaving her completely tense. With a confident smile, our protagonist proposes a business deal and says he has a favor to ask. He reveals he has something he wants her to give to Joema, leaving the young woman completely surprised. On the other side of the hall, Joe watches the two talking with a look of pure rage. With his eyes glowing blue with hatred, he whispers Makoto's name with contempt. The scene cuts to outside the mansion, showing the gardens and guests enjoying the party. Our protagonist and Shizuru Shuga walk together through the gardens while other couples stroll nearby. Suddenly, a voice calls out to them, and they turn to see who it is. Nana Hoshizu approaches with a smile and says she's very interested in the Joyan pill, asking if they have a moment to talk. The group then walks through a lit garden under a starry sky. Our boy asks what the head of the Hoshizu family wants besides the pill, and she invites him to call her aunt. With a serious look, he refuses the invitation, saying he's no longer a member of the Yamori family. Nana comments that he and Yuki are very similar, and our hero questions if she really thinks so. The older woman then reveals that after her parents' passing, Yuki was placed under the strict control of the Amaya family, and her uncle decided everything for her. She continues the story, explaining that fortunately, the young woman was recognized by a prestigious martial arts family and became a legendary cultivator. Shizuru is shocked by the revelation and asks what it means to transcend the realm of a commoner. With a serious look, our protagonist explains that it means reaching the third stage of cultivation, and that the difference between the second and third is like heaven and earth. He then understands that the young woman chose an impossible method to gain power quickly, even if it meant overloading her body and trading her life for power. Our protagonist then asks why she's telling him all this, and Nana Hoshizu reveals that she's tried everything for Yuki's condition, but there is no cure. With a sad look, she compares the situation to Shizuru's mother's, saying that nothing she does has any effect. Faced with this revelation, our hero states with determination that he wants to save her. The head of the family admits she doesn't have the ability to create a Joyan pill, but that his skills are far superior to any master she's ever seen. Shizuru is shocked to realize that the president of the Traditional Medicine Association trusts Makoto more than actual doctors. She then wonders if this legendary cultivator story is real, and if this is the real business behind it all. Our boy reflects that compared to the Luyu continent, this world's cultivation methods are primitive. With a business-like look, he states that he is also interested in the Joyan pill they are negotiating. He then proposes doing business on behalf of the Hoshizu family, and Shizuru gets excited, thinking the profits will increase at least tenfold. Nana teases the young woman, saying she only has eyes for money, but then gets serious and asks our protagonist to help Yuki. She completes her request by saying her niece is a very kind and delicate girl. In a confidential tone, the older woman reveals that actually, when the engagement was called off, Yuki rebelled once. Our protagonist is surprised by this information and listens intently to the rest of the story. Suddenly, Joema appears and calls for Nana Hoshizu, surprising her. With a smile, he says he thought he'd say goodbye before leaving. The hero of the Ama family comments that he sees Makoto and Shizuru were with her. In a friendly tone, he thanks our protagonist for today. Joe then extends his hand and says he would be happy if they could meet again somewhere. Our hero shakes his hand and, with a confident smile, replies that the feeling is mutual. During the handshake, however, our protagonist feels something strange. With a surprised look, he realizes that spiritual energy is radiating from Joe's body. A purple aura envelopes the hair of the Ama family, revealing his true power. The scene cuts to the parking lot, where Joe is about to get into his limousine. One of his bodyguards approaches and says he has a gift for him from Yuki. Sitting in the car, Joe takes the blue box and asks what it is. Upon opening the gift, he finds a green origami butterfly and wonders what it means. Not giving it much thought, he tosses the box to his bodyguard and tells him to hold it and not to open it without his permission. With a look of contempt, he complains about having to go out personally because of Hashimoto and concludes that Makoto is still the same piece of trash he's always been. Inside the limousine, Joema twists a ring that emits a bluish energy as he thinks about Nana Hoshizu and our protagonist. His face filled with rage, he grinds his teeth and swears they will regret challenging him. A sinister smile appears on his face face as he reveals his sick plan to use Yuki herself to take them both down at once. Beside him in the darkness of the car, his look-alike continues to hold the gift box without a word. At that moment, the origami butterfly inside the box begins to glow with a very intense green light. The scene shifts to a massive skyscraper that stands out against the starry night sky. Atop a building, our protagonist surveys the entire city, preparing for what's next. Holding the glowing paper butterfly, he recalls the message he sent to the heir of the Ama family. With a confident smile, he remembers telling his enemy that they would see each other again very soon. The small origami then transforms into a tracking talisman and flies through the city skies toward a target. The young man notices the talisman has stopped moving and concludes that his target must be inside that building. Looking at the building, he confirms that the location is owned by the Ama family. He then prepares for action and says it's time to begin. A moment later, he leaps from the roof with an excited yell, ready to start the invasion. Inside the building, we see a mystical golden flower and a water spiritual reishi, two extremely rare and valuable items. A businesswoman observes the rare items and thinks they are almost ready for harvest, and that if she trades them at the cultivator tournament in 3 months, she'll have a huge advantage. Suddenly, she senses a strange presence and, with a purple aura emanating from her body, asks who's there. A mysterious voice praises her ability to sense spiritual energy despite her severe injuries. A bald monk surrounded by a red aura appears, calling her the genius of the 100 Herbs sect. A drop of sweat runs down the woman's face, and she wonders if they are cultivators. With a defiant look, she questions who they are and what they want, thinking she could escape if it were just one of them. One of the monks, holding prayer beads, asks if the head of the Hoshisu family is planning to run. Another, more robust monk adds that like a lion using all its strength to hunt a rabbit, they will face her with everything they have. The two intruders surround the woman in a garden, leaving her with no escape. With a confident smile, she asks what their goal is with this invasion. The larger monk replies that they want her to accompany them and advises her not to try anything foolish. The other monk, however, suggests it would be easier to just break her arms and legs. With an intimidating look, the woman touches a giant plant, a purple energy emanating from her hand. She then challenges them, saying that since they've come this far, she'll make sure they are properly entertained. The giant plant begins to glow with a bluish light, and one of the monks yells in surprise, asking what that is. The larger monk screams in pain, realizing he's been poisoned by the plant. The woman, however, thinks the poison won't affect her as long as she keeps the green heart grass in her mouth. With a determined look, she decides she needs to escape while she can, as she stands no chance against the two intruders. Suddenly, a terrifying presence with glowing red eyes appears in front of her. With a shocked expression, she wonders what that monstrous creature is. A giant purple shadow completely envelops her, and she questions if this is the art of shadows. A man surrounded by a purple smoke, like aura, appears, and the woman concludes he is from the Hidden Shadow sect. With slow steps, the man confirms they are from the sect that destroyed the 100 Herbs sect that day. Enveloped by the purple shadow, the woman asks who he is, as they weren't supposed to reveal themselves now. With a look of surprise, she finally recognizes the mysterious man. With a malicious smile and a talisman in hand, our protagonist reveals that it was actually him disguised as Joe Ama the whole time. Elsewhere, a security guard yawns and says the shift change is finally over and that he's going to grab something to eat. He then suggests his colleague have some hot stew, and the other agrees it sounds like a good idea. One of the guards wonders what Lord Joe plans to eat in that room, and the other tells him not to worry, as he's a young master. Our hero then uses the cloud shadow step and moves swiftly down the hallway, leaving the security guards behind. With the glowing butterfly talisman in his hand, our protagonist wonders if this is Joe Ama's room. The magical butterfly then flies through the door and into the room. Our boy follows the talisman, noticing it has stopped in front of the bedroom door. He then understands that his enemy isn't inside and becomes suspicious. The scene cuts to a guy eagerly eating instant noodles. This person is actually Joe Ama's look-alike, and he's in a messy room, complaining that he's never had a choice in life. While eating his ramen, he ironically wonders if he wasn't the one who wanted to live in a mansion and eat fancy food. Suddenly, he grips his fork tightly and says the situation is unforgivable. With a look of pure rage, he questions why he has to endure this treatment just because he looks like the family's heir. The scene then flashes back to the limousine, where the real Joe Ama is sitting next to his look-alike, who is all tied up. With a cold look, the real here reminds the look-alike that he knows what would happen if people found out about his existence. He continues the humiliation, saying the look-alike is just a fake kept alive by him, and that he can never become the real one. With tears in his eyes, the imposter is forced to hear that his only value is to play the part of a fake. Back in the room, the look-alike holds the gift box and scoffs at the order not to open it without permission. Without a second thought, he opens the box and finds the origami butterfly glowing with a green light. The magical butterfly flies out of the box, and the look-alike screams in fear, asking what that is. Suddenly, a shadow appears behind him, and an intimidating voice asks who he is. Before the imposter could react, he's hit with a a swift blow and falls to the ground, screaming in pain. Lying amidst bottles and clutter, the look-alike doesn't understand what just happened. Our protagonist approaches and says it's no wonder he didn't sense any spiritual energy. Terrified, the imposter recognizes our hero from the party and tries to pass himself off as the real Joe Ama. With a cold look, our protagonist corrects him, saying he's just a fake. With his eyes glowing red, he questions him about the whereabouts of the real family hair. Elsewhere, a group of thugs gathers, and one of them talks on the phone, promising to take care of a student in no time. The man explains that the target always takes this route, and that they are ambushing him right now. He continues the conversation, promising to break the kid's arms and legs and deliver him to his boss. Our protagonist walks calmly through a dark alley, approaching the trap. With a serious look, he thinks about the existence of a spiritual vessel and wonders if there's a fourth stage cultivators supporting the noble families. He reflects that a spiritual vessel is a tool with special abilities, and that its quality depends on the energy the master forger puts into it. With that in mind, he concludes that with this world's weak spiritual energy, forging such an item would be impossible without reaching the fourth stage of cultivation. He also considers that if the Ima family possesses a spiritual source, the story is completely different. With a determined look, our protagonist decides he needs to resolve the Ima family matter quickly so he can find the Ryuta spiritual source and level up. Suddenly, a voice calls out to him, and a group of thugs appears in the alley. With sinister smiles on their faces, they surround our hero, ready for the attack. Their leader reveals that someone paid a lot of money for them to take care of the kid. Surrounded by a purple aura, our protagonist isn't intimidated and glares at the attackers with contempt. The gang leader gets annoyed by his look and questions his attitude. Completely losing it, he yells for his men to get our protagonist. The thugs charge forward, yelling that they're going to finish him off once and for all. With a confident smile, the leader brags about bringing skilled men and that there's no way they can lose. However, before he could finish his sentence, his goons start getting defeated one by one. With a look of astonishment, he can't believe what he's seeing and is completely shocked. Our hero moves with insane speed and lands a devastating punch on one of the attackers. With a final blow, he finishes off the last thug in his path. The gang leader's jaw drops, and he says it's impossible, unable to believe the beating his men just took. With a look of pure contempt, the gang leader wonders if our protagonist is even human. The scene cuts to Nana Hoshizu's residence, showing a luxurious and well-kept garden. Yuki Amaya is in the middle of a scene of destruction as a man in sunglasses approaches her. The man shows a tablet and says this is the footage from the rooftop camera. He reveals that around 1 in the morning, 2 men appeared and attacked Lady Nana on the roof, and that the recording ends there. With a serious look, Yuki holds the tablet, and the man explains that there were 3 attackers in total, but they have a clear shot of one of their faces. Upon seeing the image, she is shocked and realizes the man was at the party that day. With a sinister smile, our protagonist's image appears on the screen, and the young woman confirms it's Mr. Yemori. A black limousine pulls up in front of a luxurious and well-kept house. Yuki holds her phone, looking at the screen with determination. The image shows a message with a photo of the house and the address, 432 Amiya Street. With a look of confirmation, she thinks this is the right place. Filled with anger, she can't believe that Makoto Yemori would go after her relative. Suddenly, a muscular man with his arm in a sling appears and asks if she has business with Lord Makoto. With a look of pure fury, she questions if he is Makoto's subordinate and orders him to take her to his boss. The muscular man informs her that he is inside the mansion at that moment. Yuki observes several men working in the garden and thinks they are just commoners. On a sunny balcony, the gang leader who was defeated earlier serves a glass of water to our protagonist. Suddenly, the young woman appears, shouting Makoto's name, and our hero recognizes her. Surprised, with a look of pure rage, she orders him to release her aunt immediately and promises she will ignore the incident. Our protagonist, however, doesn't understand anything and asks what she's talking about. Completely beside herself, Yuki confronts him and questions the meaning of kidnapping her aunt. Our protagonist is shocked by the accusation and asks if she really suspects him. The young woman then shows the tablet and yells that they have proof and that he didn't think he was being recorded. The image on the screen shows a person identical to our hero talking to Nana on the destroyed rooftop. With a sinister smile, the imposter faces the camera, revealing his true identity. Our boy realizes the man in the video impersonated him to kidnap Nana and that he probably used a spiritual vessel. Surrounded by an aura of power, Yuki yells for him to return her aunt, or she will punish him with the power of a cultivator. Our protagonist, however, defends himself, saying there's no way he could have visited Nana's house at 1:30 in the morning. Yuki is completely confused by the answer, beginning to doubt her own accusations. The gang leader shows the chat history with Lord Joe, revealing they were planning to ambush our protagonist. Yuki, however, is still suspicious and asks how he explains the camera footage. Our hero then shows a video on his phone, saying he recorded it to preserve the evidence confidence. In the video, the look-alike introduces himself as Yashihiro Yoga and reveals he acts as Joe Ama's body double. He continues his explanation, saying he usually acts as a bodyguard, but at that party, he attended as the double. Yuki is shocked by the revelation and asks if Joe has the power to change his appearance. With a serious look, our boy confirms that he certainly possesses a spiritual vessel for that purpose. The young woman is speechless upon hearing about the spiritual vessel, commenting that they are precious items passed down through generations in noble families. Our protagonist explains that Joe's intention was to impersonate him, kidnap Nana, and pin the blame on him so that she would eliminate him permanently. Completely furious, Yuki says she will settle the score with Joe, but our protagonist warns her that if she does, her aunt will be in danger. Desperate, she asks what she should do and if she should just watch in silence. With a calm and confident look, he reveals that there is actually a way to use Joe's own scheme against him. With a sinister smile, our hero states that they will make him dig his own grave.